while researching the life of the infamous Lucrezia Borgia, one name kept popping up: Infans Romanus, aka the Roman child. Who was this kid? What did they want with my girl Lucy? Today we are talking all about that. Welcome back to the channel. You know what time it is? Let's get into the nitty-gritty, the important stuff. But before we do, if you love learning about the strange and scandalous side of history, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. In past videos, I've mentioned Lucrezia Borgia's two husbands, Giovanni Sforza and Alfonso of Aragon. We may never know for sure, but there are a few educated guesses. For starters, we know that Alexander VI had numerous illegitimate children because he was unexactly shy about his relationships with women, but he only acknowledged a small handful of them. On top of Infans Romanus, there was Giovanni, Cesare, and Juan, each by a different woman. Specifically, he feeds into the most famous scandal of all, the one that has cemented their notoriety throughout history: incest. I'll get more into the details in a moment, but basically, a rumor emerged that Lucrezia was having an affair with her father, Alexander VI. First things first, while the claim that Lucrezia had an affair with her father, Alexander VI, has become synonymous with the Borgia name writers, artists, and intellectuals like Pietro Arentino, the artist Raphael, and even French King Charles VIII poked fun at her, perpetuating the idea that she was the product of incest. Obviously, the poison plot failed, but 2 years later, the infamous chestnuts incident occurred. But given the context of these accusations, it seems likely that they were just another attempt to soil her reputation. Still, the damage was done. Throughout history, Lucrezia Borgia has been remembered as the quintessential femmettle, the epitome of feminine wiles and deadly allure. But digging deeper into her life and loves reveals a more complex and tragic figure. From her forced marriages to her infamous reputation, Lucrezia was a victim of circumstance, a pawn in a deadly game of power and corruption. Her tangled web of family ties, including the mysterious Infans Romanus, only adds to the puzzle of her life. Ultimately, separating fact from fiction in the Borgia saga is nearly impossible, but that's what makes them so fascinating. During the feast, Lucrezia and her father, along with several cardinals and high-ranking church officials, attended a brothel and prostituted themselves. Now I'll leave the lurid details to your imagination, but suffice it to say that the event was considered scandalous by contemporaries, and became the fodder of future gossip. It's unclear who leaked news of the brothel escapade, but again, we have to ask, who benefits? Well, the usual suspects, Lucrezia's political enemies, who could use this scandal to paint her and her father as immoral and corrupt. However, we have to consider who was spreading these rumors. Many of the people accusing Lucrezia were from northern Italy and France, territories that were constantly at odds with the Borgia's native central Italy. As such, these writers, artists, and nobles may have been targeting Lucrezia and her family for political reasons. Indeed, it seems likely that this was the case. It's important to note that this was a whisper, a rumor that circulated mostly in northern Italy and France. It was never substantiated, and the closest thing to evidence is Giovanni Sforza's accusation during his annulment trial. To be fair, Giovanni had reason to be angry. Not only was he teased relentlessly about his impotence, but his wife was accused of producing monstrous offspring. Remember, he was trying to secure a political alliance with the Borgias, and he needed to clear his name. But despite his pleas, the marriage was dissolved in 1497. Part of the reason this rumor took hold was because of an accusation made by her first husband, Giovanni Sforza, when he tried to get the marriage annulled. He claimed that Lucrezia was incapable of producing children because she was the product of a monstrous matrilineal incestuous relationship. Now we don't know if he was referring to a supposed romance between Lucrezia and her dad, or if he was trying to suggest that Lucrezia was somehow related to Venazia and Infans Romanus, given that all three of them lived together for part of their lives. Either way, Infans Romanus fits neatly into this sordid tale, and as far as we can tell, the scandal never really went away. Even after the marriage was annulled and Lucrezia moved on to her second husband, gossip about her affair with her dad followed her to her grave. However, some scholars argue that all three of these men were actually the product of just one affair with one woman who bore the Pope multiple children over several years. By that point, he was living in Rome as a young adult and working for his half-sister Lucrezia. One story, likely apocryphal, claims that Infans Romanus became enamored with his cousin, Lucrezia's daughter, Camilla, and began having an affair with her. If true, this would have been yet another layer of icky family entanglement. Unfortunately, this little fling is where our sources stop providing details about Infans Romanus's life. We don't know if Camilla and Infans Romanus were ever caught in the act, nor do we know if anyone was bothered by the idea of cousins getting it on. Maybe Infans Romanus's existence was just too confusing for chroniclers to deal with. Regardless, his story embodies the decadence and darkness that defined the Borgia family name. That woman was likely Laura, a former servant in the Borgia household. If that's the case, then Infans Romanus could have been another one of Laura's children, which would mean he was full sibling to Giovanni, Cesare, and Juan, Or maybe he was the product of an entirely different affair. I'm referring to an infant named Infans Romanus. It seems unlikely that Julia Farnese gave birth to him, considering she didn't raise him and there is little evidence that she even knew how to read or write. Now, you may be wondering why this matters. After all, we're talking about a baby who lived over 500 years ago. Well, one reason is that Infans Romanus helps us understand the moral ambiguity of the Borgia family dynamic. Here's what I mean. Imagine being raised your whole life knowing that your father is the Pope, your half-siblings are a duke and a cardinal, and one of your half-siblings, along with your mother, is engaged in a decades-long affair. If that doesn't sound like a dysfunctional family, I don't know what does. Moreover, imagine finding out that your own mother was once the mistress of your dad, and that at least one of your siblings may not actually be related to the Pope after all. Talk about a royal pigsty. Infans Romanus's existence reflects the blurring of familial boundaries within the Borgia household, and by extension, it mirrors the larger moral collapse associated with the family and the papacy as a whole during the Renaissance. Additionally, Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia weren't exactly known for being faithful, and given the circumstances of Infans Romanus's life, it's possible that he wasn't actually related to either of them. Instead, he may have simply been another one of the many bastard children running around Rome who were passed off to Vanaza to raise. After all, she had 6 children in total, 4 of whom were said to be acknowledged by Alexander VI. And as far as we can tell, Infans Romanus was raised by Vanaza, not Julia, given that Alexander VI was his father according to the first bull. You would think he'd grow up in the Borgia household alongside his half-siblings, Lucrezia, Cesare, and Giovanni. But nope, Infans Romanus spent his childhood with Vanaza and her other children. So let's break it down. Infans Romanus pops up in 2 papal bulls, or official documents issued by Pope Alexander VI. The first decree from 1497 establishes that Infans Romanus, born in 1492, is the legitimate son of Alexander VI and his mistress. The second bull from 1501 declares that Infans Romanus is instead the natural son of Cesare Borgia, Duke of Valentinois and Acerta Antonia. Confusingly, both bulls establish that the child's mother is one Julia. She was married to Giovanni from 1493 to 1497 when the union was annulled. The following year, she wed Alfonso, who met a gruesome end in 1503. Both marriages were politically motivated, there was no love involved, and when Alfonso kicked the bucket, many suspected foul play because, well, this was the Borgia family we're talking about. But there's another man who appears to have been romantically involved with Lucrezia, one who is the source of some of the most salacious Borgia rumors. Now, to add to the confusion, Julia was the sister of another one of Alexander VI's mistresses, the infamous Vanaza Catani. Who was his mother, and what was his relationship to Lucrezia? As for the mother question, well, remember that according to the bulls, Infans Romanus was sired by Alexander VI or Cesare Borgia, but he was raised by Whatever the truth, Infans Romanus's origins are clouded in contradictions and speculation. Much like the rest of the Borgia family tree, another reason we should care about Infans Romanus is because he plays directly into the Borgia family lore. It's unclear when exactly Infans Romanus died, but it seems to have been sometime in the following the annulment. Lucrezia returned to her father's court and soon became the target of northern Italian gossip. For example, in 1498, a member of the Sforza family, who opposed the Borgia, wrote to the French king, suggesting that Lucrezia had poisoned her father. In the end, we have no way of knowing whether Lucrezia slept with her father. Thanks so much for watching. And don't forget to check out my podcast, available on various platforms.